Welcome everyone to the RACGP free webinar, Medicare and the MBS. Just so that I can make sure that everyone can hear me, could you please type a question into the question box if you can hear me?
Don't think.
So, welcome to the webinar, MBS and Medicare. So tonight we've got a presentation, Medicare and the MBS, an introduction for GPs. This webinar is brought to you by the New Fellows Committee of the Victoria Faculty, and we thank you for joining us at this time of the day when most of you are quite tired, so we appreciate your attendance. My name's Wilson, and I'm a GP in Victoria and a member of the New Fellows Committee. I'll be facilitating the webinar tonight, and I'll ask our presenters your questions to make this session as interactive as possible. Throughout the course of a webinar, we do have a lot of questions coming in, so rest assured we will try to get to your questions as soon as possible. But if we don't, then we will try to address them on Share GP. So do continue typing your questions. And on my right here, on your left, we've got Phil Cuttress, and off screen we've got Ramanathan Narendranathan. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. So I'll introduce them formally in a second, but before we get started, I'd like to make an acknowledgement of country. So we recognise the traditional custodians of the land and the sea on which we live and work. Just a reminder to all attendees that free RACGP Q&I CPD points will be earned for attending the entirety of the session, and the details can be downloaded from My RACGP on the RACGP website. This session is being recorded and it'll be uploaded onto the RACGP Victoria resources page on the website, and a link will also be sent to the attendees with the survey. I'll now cover some technical aspects of the platform, especially for those of you who are not familiar or joining the webinar environment for the first time. So at the top, you'll see the web address for technical support if you're experiencing any technical issues. If you have any IT issues during the session and you need to contact them, we won't be able to assist you, unfortunately, but you'll be able to communicate with us through the question box on the side of your screen. Next, you'll be able to see a small red arrow, and use this arrow to hide and unhide your control panel whenever you want to type a question. If you have a question, please type it into the questions box, and everyone is muted by default except for the organisers. So if you have questions, rather than chat or raising your hand, we would request that you please type into the questions section. Also, the audio box gives you an option to listen via telephone line or via the speakers. So if you're using the speakers, we do recommend that you use earphones as the audio is clearer. However, you can also dial in via telephone if you find that the connection is clearer. And that phone number and a webinar ID will appear on your screen. So the learning objectives for tonight's webinars are as follows. So we will be discussing general Medicare principles such as attendance, chronic disease management, and DHS rules, to be able to implement accurate record-keeping systems and ensure compliance with Medicare and MBS. And finally, to be able to outline compliance requirements and ways to reduce the risk of non-compliance. So before we begin, I'd like to ask some questions about where everyone's from and where they're based. So you'll see the poll appearing on your screen shortly. First question, where are you from? right, we're at 70%, so we might wait a few more seconds. All right, and most of you have voted. So we've got 85% from Victoria and 10% from New South Wales ACT and the rest from other states. All right, and the next question, where are you based? All right, so we have 52% urban, 25% rural, 22% regional centre. So welcome to our regional colleagues, and we're glad that you're able to join us via this platform. All right, next question. So are you a All right, most people have responded, and we have quite a large IMG representation, 1/3, and 22% new fellows, 22% registrars, 18% GPs fellowed beyond 5 years. So we've got a pretty reasonable spread there. All right, so now I have the pleasure of introducing you to our presenters. Here we have Philip Cuttress, and Philip is an Assistant Director in the Health Programs Division of the Department of Human Services. Philip has a Master's degree in Policy and Human Services from RMIT and has worked in the Medicare area of the Department of Human Services since 2011. Also off screen, we have Ramanathan Narendranathan, who you'll see shortly. Ramanathan or Naren has been a GP in Australia since 1994. He's currently practicing as a GP in a community health centre in Melbourne. He's worked as an emergency physician and as a microbiologist in Australia, and he has been a medical advisor with the Medicare compliance area since 2007. I'd now like to hand it over to Philip, so thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone as well for making it here tonight. I know you're all very busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to come and listen to us this evening. My name is Phil Cuttress. As Wilson said, I'm here from the Department of Human Services. I'm here tonight to give you a bit of a rundown on a few elements of the Medicare program, just to increase your familiarity with the program and hopefully help you avoid some of the pitfalls that you might experience in dealing with the department. Go. Nice. There we go. Crisis averted. Okay, so today we'll be speaking about a few topics that we've identified that are most relevant to general practice or people working in general practice. Some general Medicare principles. Some attendance-specific item rules, information regarding the limits on chronic disease management items, and there are some other key messages that DHS would like to share with you. After tonight, you should have a better understanding of why the department requires additional things from you in certain claiming situations before we can process a benefit for the services that you've claimed. Now, I haven't got too long tonight, so I'm just going to forge ahead. Moving on to general Medicare principles, I'm going to start with the first one is Medicare items are subject to being payable only when provided as a clinically relevant service. Now, if you're comfortable with the service that you've provided and that it is clinically relevant, you must then identify if that service satisfies an item descriptor. MBS items do only attract a benefit where you've satisfied the item descriptor in full. Each MBS item is considered to be a complete medical service, that is, each item covers every element required to perform the service described in that item. I realise I haven't provided a great deal of information on these three concepts, but that's because Dr. Naren from the Department of Health will be addressing those in greater detail. So I'll skim over them for the time being. One that I'm going to expand on a bit more is the aftercare rule. It's a core principle of Medicare, and it relates to the complete medical service concept in a way. MBS procedural items cover all necessary standard follow-up treatment for that particular service. The relevant aftercare period for each procedure item is set in consultation with the Department of Health and reflects the expected duration of aftercare for that particular service. As GPs, you'll only need to be concerned with aftercare if you've performed the original procedure. If this is the case, attendances can still apply in the aftercare period of a procedural item if they are unrelated to the procedure you performed, or if the patient develops complications that would not constitute normal aftercare for that procedure. So if that is the case and you are claiming an attendance in the aftercare period, you just need to let the department know that it was not normal aftercare or a not normal aftercare situation, and we can still process a benefit for that claim. The other general principle that I wanted to touch on today is multiple service rules that apply when more than one service is performed on the same occasion. Multiple service rules recognise that there are efficiencies in doing more than one service on the same occasion. These rules apply a reduction in the value of these additional services accordingly. The multiple service rule you're most likely to encounter as GPs is the multiple operation rule that applies when you do more than one operation or procedural item on the same occasion. Under this rule, the highest value item is treated as normal. However, the second highest value item is processed at 50% of its normal value, and then every item after that is processed at 25% of its normal value. So something to keep in mind is that although they've got listed schedule fees against each of these items, when provided in combination or an approved combination that is claimable, it does recognise the efficiencies of that and will progressively reduce the benefit down for each individual service. So where you notice that benefits are being reduced on statements, you just want to check what you've performed against any multiple service rules for those item types that are in the MBS. They're all explained in there. There's no mystery ones. So you should be able to find the information to explain what it is that you need, and if you do need further clarification, you can contact the department and we can help you out. I'll move on to the bread and butter of general practice under Medicare, which is the attendance items. It's probably no surprise to you that a large number of questions the department receives from GPs in relation to attendance items. Some of you may wonder why we require you to provide some indication of separation between attendance items when they're claimed on the same day for the same patient. The reason is, as a general rule, only one attendance item applies per attendance. The reason the general attendance items are separated by time and complexity, for example, in Group A1, where a lot of the standard consultations sit, is that the MBS is into most cases to account for all the patient's treatment needs on any given attendance. So you're able to address multiple concerns on that attendance and just count the total time and complexity involved, and that should be guiding your item selection. By way of an example, where you've attended a patient, say, under an asthma cycle of care attendance, but you also provide other treatment unrelated to the asthma cycle of care, you would be able to count all the time spent treating that patient on that occasion and then select the relevant asthma cycle of care item based on the total attendance duration, not just the portion you were dedicating to providing the asthma side of things. An example of an exception to this rule is the telehealth patient and support services that you may become involved with when you are providing clinical support to a patient who is on a telehealth call to a specialist. These items are to provide that clinical support in relation to your referred patients, so rather than to provide active treatment yourself. Were the patient to present with an unrelated condition, you could actually build that clinical support component under that relevant telehealth support item, and then you could build another attendance item for the unrelated condition. Now, all attendance items require a personal performance by the responsible practitioner. Furthermore, only the time you spend providing active treatment to your patient can be considered when determining which attendance item applies. You can, of course, receive essential assistance in performing an attendance service, but you cannot incorporate the time spent by other people assisting when you're determining the correct item to bill for your time. Some procedural and testing items include any associated attendance that are performed on the same occasion. Just by way of an example, burns dressing items 30003 and 30006 both include an attendance component within them, so you cannot claim an attendance on the same occasion. You can, however, bill an attendance on the same day as long as you indicate that they occurred on separate occasions. Okay, so for items that don't include associated attendance, procedural items, for example, an attendance item can be billed on the same occasion, but you do have to keep in mind that any time spent in relation to that non-attendance item on a given occasion is covered under that non-attendance item, and you can't bill for that time under both the procedural item and an attendance item in combination. They'd have to be separate to one another. The above points form the reason why the department requires you to advise us of the circumstances around your claim when you perform more than one service on a patient. Where two items will be payable on the same occasion, as per the principles above, you just need to indicate to us when you're claiming that they were for either unrelated purposes or separate conditions, whatever would apply in that particular circumstance. Where items are performed on the same day but are only payable on separate occasions, you'd also need to indicate that sort of separation to us, perhaps by different service times indicating that a different occasion occurred. Without this sort of information being provided to us, we don't know the clinical situation that occurred, we don't know whether it was appropriate or not, and so we have to err on the side of caution because we are dealing with the public's money and we will not pay a benefit. So if you have performed something that is appropriate to have in combination, you just need to let us know why it's appropriate, and then we can help by assisting in paying a benefit for that. All right, one topic that we receive inquiries about, probably above all others, is in relation to chronic disease management items. We understand it's a huge part of general practice and a huge part of patient care. A significant proportion of these are in relation to the ability to claim a plan item for a patient. Today I'm going to go through a quick rundown of the rules around the limitations placed on these items to assist you in knowing when to bill these services. Chronic disease management items have a minimum claiming frequency, that is, the shortest time possible between billing the same item more than once for the same patient. Item 721 for a GP management plan and item 723 for 10 care arrangements both have a minimum claiming frequency of 12 months, and they cannot be claimed within 3 months of a review item 732. Speaking of review item 732, it has a minimum claiming frequency of 3 months and can apply to both a 721 plan and a 723 TCA. If a GP management plan and a TCA are reviewed on the same day, if you've got the patient and you're reviewing both aspects, you can bill us item 732 for both, but you do need to note that each applied to a separate and distinct review in order for us to provide a benefit for that. All of the above items can be actually performed again within the minimum claiming frequency period where exceptional circumstances apply. And for these items, exceptional circumstances is taken to be a significant change in the patient's condition or care circumstances that necessitate the creation of a new plan. This could include the development of comorbidities or complications, the deterioration of the patient's condition, illness, or even the death of their carer. If this is the case in relation to one of your patients, just be sure to note that exceptional circumstances apply when claiming for the service. The other major limitation that applies to chronic disease management items is in relation to attendances performed on the same day. This list only includes the relevant GP standard and after hours items which do not attract benefits when claimed on the same day as a chronic disease management item. Now this rule is legislative, and in this case there is no exceptional circumstances, there is no notation that you can provide. They are just flat out not payable, and we will always reject them when they're claimed in combination on the same day. It has been around for a few years now, but we do still find that we have to remind providers relatively frequently that it's not an appropriate billing combination and that there isn't any notation you can provide that will allow that to be paid. Sorry to be a downer. Checking on the care plan status of a patient, we also have a few features within the HPOS service, the Health Provider Online Services, that enable you to check on a care plan status of a given patient. So there are two options in there. One of them is the Care Plan Checker. This one you do need to fulfil some certain requirements, including having the patient's consent to check their care plan status, and they do need to have a Medicare Online account. With that, you can identify the date that they last received the plan and how long it's been. The other alternative is to use the MBS item checker, which is a less precise method. It just advises whether or not you can claim a CDM item, whether the 721 or 723. It doesn't give you the date that it was provided, but you don't need to get the patient's consent to check their history. So there are some other requirements involved in it, but if you log into the HPOS portal, it outlines the requirements that you need to fulfill in order to use that more detailed version. But there is a simplified version that you do not need to have the patient's consent or fulfill other requirements. And it will just simply ask whether or not, if you claimed for that item, whether it would pay or not. Okay, other key messages. In closing, there are a few other key messages I'd like you all to take away from my presentation. The first is that there is a bit of a misconception in the health industry that the Department of Human Services payment system is the final word on claims. To put it another way, practitioners are of the understanding that once DHS has paid a claim, that is the end of the matter. That is not the case. Benefits paid by DHS are still subject to auditing and post-payment compliance activities by the Department of Health. This feeds into my next message, which is the department only assesses claims based on the prescribed rules. The principles that I've touched on throughout this presentation all have their basis in the legislative requirements of the Medicare program. Outside of one specific circumstance, which is the Medicare Claims Review Panel, the department does not require clinical justification to be provided in support of claims. The department is simply not resourced to make those clinical judgments on submitted claims. The question of whether a billed service was clinically appropriate or not is something that provider compliance at the Department of Health makes an evaluation on should you be audited. The final point I wanted to raise up was that the department is looking for your input and advice in improving the educational material that we do have available for medical practitioners on our website. If there is any topic you believe is missing, or if there are gaps in the guides that we do currently have available, we'd actually love to hear about it. We put these education guides up based on our understanding of the program, which is as a service delivery agency. We don't necessarily see things the same way that you do, and your input will be invaluable in allowing us to make sure that we provide the best possible educational experience for you guys to make you increase your understanding and help you avoid any pitfalls that could otherwise have gone away. With your help, we can give you the assurance that the information you need to interact with the department is provided by an authority on the topic. So I'd just like to thank you all for your time.
So I'll get you back. I'll get you back, Phil. We've got quite a influx of questions coming in, so you're not off the hook that easily. So I've had a few questions coming in, Phil, just about specific item numbers and claiming combinations. We were hoping you could clarify.
I might be able to. There's a lot of items.
So one of our questions here is, can we in fact bill a 721, a 723 and a 2715 on the same day? And my understanding was that that is possible as long as the individual descriptors are satisfied, but perhaps you could expound on that.
Look, you've got the essence of it, Wilson. There's no specific limitation between chronic disease management and mental health. As long as the chronic disease management services aren't being provided in relation to the patient's mental health, there is referral under the Allied Health Scheme for chronic disease management for psychology services. So as long as they've got both a chronic disease that is not of a mental nature and would be best addressed under the chronic disease management scheme, and you had a mental health issue to deal with as well that wasn't specifically related to that chronic disease, you could have those in combination, but you just do have to be mindful that we don't want to give you the impression you can cross-pollinate a bunch of things. They have to be separate and distinct issues that you're dealing with. As long as you provide us with that information, if you're encountering troubles claiming, it shouldn't be an issue. But my understanding is, as long as the clinical basis for those services are met, that combination can be built.
Yeah. I think you've touched on it, hit the nail on the head really. We have to make sure that the services that are being claimed are clinically relevant and accepted by the body of the peers, and that they match the individual item descriptors when claiming combination. I've got a few questions on specific situations.
1 for 1.
So, can you claim an asthma cycle of care with an item 23?
No. Next question.
No.
If you look at the structure of an asthma cycle of care item, you'll see that it follows an item 23 very similar, and that it requires the same: take a relevant patient history, take a due care and developing notes, those sorts of things. The item is effectively a 23 with the asthma cycle of care component incorporated into it. So if you're addressing a patient's concerns that's both in relation to asthma cycle of care and perhaps they've got a cold, perhaps they've got a sore leg, I don't know, you would count the total time that you spent and then bill it under the relevant asthma cycle of care item. Say 10 minutes asthma cycle of care, 20 minutes other condition. You bill an item that sits in that 30-minute range for the services that you've done.
All right. I think Naren will go into these more specifically in his presentation. So we'll keep the questions coming. Also, slightly unrelated, must we store signed bulk bill vouchers for 2 years?
Well, record keeping requirements actually falls under compliance, so I'd probably have to defer to that. But my understanding recently is that everything is a standard minimum 2 years. I think there was a recent change to the legislation to standardise record keeping requirements for referrals and other things. But I'm happy to be corrected, Naren, if that's not right.
The vouchers itself don't need to be kept, but the patient should be offered the voucher and they need to sign it because they have to assign the benefit. But keeping the voucher is not necessary.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. And quite a few were interested in the link that you mentioned to access the care plan status of the patient. So by that, I assume they're asking about whether a patient is eligible to be billed a particular.
Yeah, so we won't provide you with like what their care plan says. We don't receive the care plan. You don't need to submit the care plan. Effectively, what it does is just provide you with some more details. In fact, I'll probably go into a bit more specifics about it. So we've got the patient care plan history function is what it's called. It lists all of the care plan items within the preceding calendar year, the date the service was provided, the item number and description. As I said, you do have to gain the patient's verbal consent. The patient can log and view who has access to their care plan or what providers have. So I would suggest that you would record any time that the patient does give their consent, just in case there's any troubles down the line. It would be better to be safe than sorry. You are bound by the HPOS terms and conditions of use and access when using the service, but that's standard for using HPOS in general. You cannot view the patient's care plan history if the patient's under 18 or if they don't have registration with our online services, or they don't have a care plan history. But that gives you a lot more detail than the simple yes/no item checker function. So we have listened to GPs about what they want about being able to get a bit more information, but obviously there's a few more requirements that you have to fulfill.
Yeah. And is there a link which is easily accessible where the GPs can go to attend to access these functions?
It's within the HPOS portal, so you have to, I think, get a Proda account, get logged into HPOS. So I could probably spruik it for a bit, but the guys from HPOS will do a better job. But you have to be in HPOS to access the service. But once you are in there, you do have access to the full suite of services available. I've only talked about the care plan ones, but there's many great options in there. There's even a claiming channel for single claims that goes straight to the department as well. So there's lots of different things you can do in HPOS, update registration, set delegations. I would recommend you get across it, because this is basically our hub of online services that we provide to you as practitioners to deal with the department rather than hopping on the phone.
All right, and I've accessed that myself, actually, so we can certainly make that link available to you, our listeners. I highly recommend it. It's a trove of knowledge, and certainly save a lot of tears on rejected item number claims, I can attest. So With that being said, thanks for the presentation, and we'll have you back after Naren's presentation to answer any other questions which might come in. So I'll now like to introduce you to Naren.
Thanks.
So thanks for joining us, and if you'd like to take away your presentation, Naren.
Thank you, Wilson, and also thank you for the audience coming at this time of the day to listen to us. It is good to see so many people listening to the webinar. So I am from the Medicare compliance area for the last 11 years. So I am going to, this is not moving. And so today, I am going to talk to you about compliance requirements, compliance behavior and treatment models, treatment methods, incorrect billing consequences, and also how to reduce the risk of non-compliance, how to correct claims, and support resources that are available. And the two websites that are there, these are the MBS and PBS websites where you can go and get information. The easiest way for you to go in there would be if you Google MBS online or PBS online, you will get to this website. You don't need to have the whole website written. And today I am going to mainly concentrate on the MBS items only, not on the PBS items. And compliance requirements are the major part of the, it is the responsibility of the provider, and if any item is billed under your name, you are responsible for it. You may be able to delegate it, but the delegate doesn't carry the responsibility. The reception staff may do something on your instruction. You may give your provider number. If it is abused, you are personally responsible. So the accurate claiming and reviewing of the claiming at the end of the day is an important part. If I am a general practitioner, what I usually do is I make sure that whatever that I've gone through today is under my name, is all okay as I understand it. So that is the most important. Your provider number is a sacred number. You are supposed to keep it securely. You may give it to somebody who you trust. If they abuse it, you are responsible. And one way of making sure everything is done properly is reviewing your claim at the end of the day. And the principles of billing Medicare, service must be clinically relevant. Philip was talking to you about item 721, 723, they can be claimed every year, once every 12 months. That doesn't mean it will be paid if you claim that way, because it is legislated that way. But you should make sure that it is clinically relevant to do it that way. What I mean by that is, if you have a house that you are building, you have a plan, and it takes 3 years to build, you don't go and rewrite the plan every year. The plan is there and you only review, and also you only review if there had been a building activity. If there is no building activity for 4 months, there is no point in reviewing the building plan. In the same way, there is no 3-month automatic right of reviewing the plan. It needs to be clinically relevant. What is clinically relevant is what is generally accepted to the general body of general practitioners. That is what is legislated as. So clinical relevant is if another GP is in similar situation would do it. So it is very important for any service to be clinically relevant. Like if somebody has a cough or cold, you can call them every day to see whether they are developing pneumonia, but your peers would say it is not relevant to do it every day. But if the particular person has a cough and cold and has a temperature and he is clinically compromised or he is immunosuppressed, you are worried about him pneumonia, or you may need to send him to hospital. If you get him for 1 or 2 days regularly, generally the chances are your peers would agree that is an appropriate clinically relevant service. In addition to being clinically relevant primarily, the service must meet the item descriptor completely. Not that 80%, 70%, it should be 100% compliant with the item descriptor. So then you may be able to bill for the service. And the third, a derived concern is whether there is sufficient clinical input. Because we were talking earlier with Philip about 721, 723, 2715. And if you have a 10-minute appointment, and if you have done all three of them, people would say, in a hairdressing situation, whether you clip the hair and said it is a haircut, or whether you actually did a full haircut. So it is important to make sure the item descriptor is fulfilled, it is clinically relevant, and whether there is sufficient input. And when you fulfill the item descriptor, the other important thing is every service is a complete clinical service. If you see a patient who has come with a cut injury and you check the wound to see whether it is contaminated and needed to be sent to the hospital, whether he has had tetanus toxoid and all that, and you make a consultation, you took 3 minutes, you have done a item 3, if you have take a bit longer and there are some bruising and you are worried about fracture and you did more, it took a longer time and fulfill the item descriptor for 23, you can bill item 23. Then, if you suture the wound, we pay for the time for suturing as well as the material used for suturing as well as all the effort involved in suturing. So we pay for that separately. You don't take the time for suturing into consideration when you bill for the attendance item. So every service is a complete service, and they should be, if somebody comes with asthma, I am laboring this point because this is where we sometimes get into compliance issues. If somebody comes with asthma and you have kept them in the treatment room, every 10 minutes in between patients, you go and look at them. Total time is spent 25 minutes, but the patient has been in the clinic for 30 minutes, but your personal attendance is for 25 minutes. It is a level C attendance. It is not level D attendance. I hope this is very clear to you. The other thing is in the item descriptors also, another important thing is sometimes you may do 3 different services. There is a better item for that service rather than you bill individually separate 3 services.
Can you give us an example?
Like this is more in orthopedic and that type of situation, whether there is an osteectomy, hip replacement, that type of situation, adhesionolysis of. So there, sometimes it is a total hip replacement is paid as one service, as opposed to all those little tiny bit of chips of bone. Because when you open up when you do a hip replacement, if there is no osteophyte, it will be unusual for you to have a hip replacement. But if there is a large amount of osteophytes and you need to do an osteotomy, people would expect you to do. Does it make sense? And we were talking about compliance. The majority of the practitioners, 95% of the practitioners bill Medicare appropriately. That means compliantly. And they are interested in billing compliantly. And you are here today because you are interested in billing compliantly. Then sometimes there is a misunderstanding of the item, or your colleague might sell something and you haven't checked the book and you do go and bill something, and there is an occasional inadvertent non-compliance. Some people, there is a sustained non-compliance due to misunderstanding of the item over a prolonged period of time, and there are some people who have a concept of things which are not in keeping with the general body of general practitioners. We would call them probably inappropriate practice. And there is a very tiny portion of people who are out there to commit fraud. That means they haven't rendered a service and they have billed for an item number. They probably constitute altogether that sustained non-compliant inappropriate practice 1 to 2% maximum. So they are on the pointy end of the world. The vast majority of the practitioners practice appropriately. So I work on the pointy end of the world, but most of you probably will be in the bottom of the pyramid. And in dealing with this, we have 3 different sets of things. One of the 2 things we do is support and education. That's the comprehensive provider support we provide by giving education to you, and this is part of the today's exercise. Sometimes we send targeted letter campaigns. Sometimes people get irked about it, but it is basically to say when you are the top provider in some area, because recently some of you might have got the opiate letter and some people were upset about it. It is not to upset people, but just to say you are the top 20% of the providers, and just look at your thing and see whether the particular PBS requirement was met, and whether all of you are doing appropriately. If you are doing appropriately, we have nothing. But if you have looked at the items and you want to send in a voluntary acknowledgement, we would be appreciative of it, because you want to do the right thing. That is the reason we are trying to help you. If you are outlier, chances are there may be. Not that all of outliers are abnormal and there is something non-compliant, but there the chances are. We have done some studies which support that. Then we conduct audits to refine policy as a behavioral prompt and targeted letters to practitioners who are approaching high volume, rendering high volume of servicing daily. So this is done by DHS and policy division, so as part of audit. And also audit we sometimes do when on the right hand side of the pyramid, we do, if there is a sustained non-compliance, we conduct audit. But one important thing about audit you should be aware is that audit is a process where we just ask few questions to see whether you have fulfilled those requirements. It doesn't give you a point blank check to say what you are doing is clinically relevant. Audit doesn't look at clinically relevant of the service. It only looks at whether item descriptors are fulfilled partially, not even fully, because a lot of item descriptors have several requirements. We may check a few requirements and check it. And they are usually done by Australian Public Service officers. They are trained in the work, but somebody saying you are audited and you are cleared within inverted commas doesn't mean that service is clinically relevant and you have fulfilled all the item descriptors. The second part is the professional service review of the thing where we think the rendering of services is maybe there is a concern about inappropriate practice. And the Health Insurance Act basically says that inappropriate practice is basically defined in the Health Insurance Act. And inappropriate practice, I am going to read the legal definition of it, is defined as conduct by a practitioner in connection with rendering or initiating of services that would be unacceptable to the general body of that practitioner's peer group. So it is a conduct of the practitioner in connection with rendering or initiating of services that would be unacceptable to the general body of that practitioner's peer group. So it is a peer review process. It is not the medical advisor who decides. Medical advisor develop a concern. I will go through the stages at a later time. But with the concern, we would go and see the practitioner, and if the concern persists, we would go and refer them to the professional service review. It is headed by a director, so we usually call them DPSR, Director of Professional Service Review, and he will look at the doctor's notes and decide whether it need to go to a committee of peers to decide whether there is inappropriate practice. And the investigative team will go, if the cases are referred, they would go and investigate to see whether the case should proceed to the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecution. And you want to know how we target. We have data analytics, and we have recently contracted an additional data analytic team. And we mainly look at outliers or there is significant variance from peers. Because when you get letters from the professional service review section, it would say you are significantly different to your peers. That doesn't mean somebody is significantly different automatically is doing something wrong. But our analysis have shown that the more variance it is from peers, the chances are more likely to be there is inappropriate practice. But that doesn't mean all of them are. We also get fraud line tip-offs, and whenever we get a fraud line tip-off, we usually go and look at the practitioner profile to see whether it has outlier, whether practitioner is an outlier. We have a behavioral economics research team. They usually analyze data, and the opioid letter came from the behavioral economics research team. And also we conduct operational compliance activities. Now, this is what I was talking about, outliers. Now, you can see in this profile, the more you go towards the right, they look outliers. And if you look at, if I am going to look at a particular, we look at outliers from several perspectives. Only things we don't look at is the benefit paid generally, because that is not something, that is why we are highlighting here. This is not what we look at, because benefit paid depends on whether you are private billing, public billing, and all that type of thing. And it is not a very good measure of looking at a practitioner inappropriate practice, because item 23, if you claim $70, it will be reflected there, but that doesn't mean you are doing it. But that is why I put this. So don't think the benefit is the predominant thing we decide. We usually look for every item, total services, that is the area, and services per patients. That type of areas are looked at. And if you are a person who is looking at this profile, you would see that there are about 7 dots there, which looks very out of ordinary. So we would say, we would get the practitioner's profile and look at it to see whether we need to be worried. Because when you look at the practitioner's profile, we look at several things. It is not that you are outlier. Then you may be an outlier for a residential aged care facility attendance. Then when we look at your profile of patients, 75% of them are over 65. Then we would say, okay, that is compatible with this type of practice. Or there is a female practitioner and there is a lot of mammograms, we would say, okay, that is compatible with the person's profile. So it depends on the percentage of patients female, percentage of patient young, percentage of patient old. Because service for patients, we may look at it and say, if somebody has very young families in a new growth area with parents, majority of the patients are between the ages of 35 to 20 to 35, and there is young children, then we expect one child develop cold, you wait, and 2 develop, they take you to. So if there's a little bit more family services, we understand it. But if the profile doesn't sit in with the patient profile and the pathology profile, another chronic disease management item, if you look at it, there is a lot of chronic disease management item. He's an outlier. Pathology is not outlier. Diagnosing imaging is not outlier. There is referral to specialists is not outlier. Only the chronic disease management item 721, 723 is an outlier. then there is a concern, isn't it? There is less medication prescribed, less referrals, less diagnosis, but I have a lot of chronic disease. But it may still be possible. That is why we come and talk to you to see whether we can understand, because your personal way of style of practice or something may be different.
So you mentioned in this graph here that there are 7 points which may be outliers and they may be for legitimate demographic reasons. Can you give us an example of specific types of practice where you may expect to see outlying variations?
One of them would be somebody who does seasonal flu vaccine.
I see.
Within a particular day, there will be 60, 70 services, all of them are item 3 or 4.
Yeah.
They are outliers, and per day service is very high. But you look at it and say, okay, it is, look at the profile, it is 3. And most of them are 65, 55, 75. And there are some children. Then you understand, okay, this is probably. So we don't that all the time we are right, but most of the time we try to give the benefit of the doubt to the practitioner. Because even though Department of Human Services pays for item as legislated and within the legislated limits of their authority to pay, we may still need to make sure that services are clinically relevant. So we have to make sure they are billing appropriately. So we will go and see if there's an outlier, there is sufficient internal information to feel comfortable. Sometimes, because of the benefit of the doubt, somebody who may have to be seen sometimes missed as well, because we try to give the benefit of the doubt to the practitioner. If you do potency cases, if you have any concern about a particular thing, especially with CDM items, a lot of general practitioners complain to us, oh, this is my regular patient, this patient went to Gold Coast or Darwin, or they came to Victoria on a holiday and they were billed 721 or 723. And here is the number. This is the number you need to keep. Because the other one is easy. The MBS online, PBS online, Google, you will get the item descriptors. But here, these are the lines. We depend on you to identify people we may have to look at. If you send in the tip of, that doesn't mean automatically they will enter practitioner review program or audit, because we look at the profile again. It is like the outlier profile, but there is a factual tip off. Especially from the practitioner, we take it seriously. Even from patient, we take it seriously. Immediately, we go and look at the doctor's profile to see whether the concern is sustained, or whether we have to look at the profile and find there are other concerns, even though you have complained of something else, or the patient has complained of something else. The behavioral economics research team specializes in behavioral economics, which uses research from economics and psychology to understand human behavior and decision making. The team works within the provider benefit integrity division using data and evidence-based research and find better ways to communicate with stakeholders. They send targeted letters. The department was established in 1st May 2017 because there have been behavioral economics in place in different countries, and especially in UK for some time. And David Cameron established a behavioral economic team in UK. And the targeted letter campaign invites providers to review their claiming obligation. It is not saying what you are doing is wrong. It says this is the item, this is what is expected. Review your claiming. You are one of the top providers, because as I told you, the outliers are the chances of being inappropriate practice or inappropriate claiming. And we advise the purpose is to adjust their billing practices where necessary. And if they have realized that they have billed incorrectly, to send in a voluntary acknowledgement and repay the incorrectly claimed amount. In that way, you are being a sincere, reasonable citizen and a doctor. Audit, when we suspect, if a particular practitioner who has been practicing for say 10 years or 15 years, they have been billing 7 to 1, about 100 a year, suddenly it becomes 400 and the patient total numbers remain the same, then we may conduct an audit just to make sure whether somebody has misled the practitioner or there may be some changes in the practitioner's patient profile even though the numbers remain same. So there will be an audit, which will be an evidence-based assessment of provider compliance with relevant requirements related to the payment of benefit. It is item descriptor. Not all the item descriptors, but some of the relevant important item descriptors. And the audit scope and audit activities will be depending and will vary on the type of non-compliance we suspect. Because of our background in compliance, we usually say this is where people go wrong. The chances are we will ask these 2 or 3 questions. So as I said previously, the most important thing is, if you audit, at the end of the audit, if you are given the audit is okay, it doesn't mean you have fulfilled all the item descriptors, or we are not saying the services rendered by the practitioner is clinically relevant. So following an audit and closure of a case, sometimes the professional service review section may contact you because we are concerned whether the services are clinically relevant, fulfill all the item descriptors, and whether there is sufficient clinical input. Because we look at all these 3 aspects of it. So sometimes people get a bit grumpy saying, oh, we have finished an audit, why are you coming now? But here, this is a comprehensive assessment of the practitioner's billing of services with looking at the patient base. As opposed to audit doesn't look at patient base. It basically look at why there is a raising of a claiming of item in that area. The practitioner review program is for health practitioners and medical practitioners whose profession of services raises concerns of possible inappropriate practice. It is when we come to see you, it is not you are practicing inappropriately. There is a possibility it may be inappropriate practice. And the professional reviews is to determine whether the practice is inappropriate. Inappropriate practice is conduct by a practitioner in connection with rendering of or initiating of services that a practitioner's peer could reasonably conclude was unacceptable to the general body of their peers. And here, the important thing is that is one aspect of the service. And also, there is another aspect to the service where a practitioner has rendered 80 or more attendances in 20 or more days in a calendar year or in a 12-month period. So in any 12-month period, if a practitioner has rendered 80 or more attendances in 20 or more days, the legislation says the practitioner is deemed to have practiced inappropriately. And also there is another third provision. So in circumstances where including an individual, a practitioner, a body corporate, or an officer of a body corporate has knowingly, recklessly, negligently caused or permitted a practitioner employed or otherwise engaged by the person or by the body corporate to engage in conduct that constitute inappropriate practice. Sometimes body corporate, you are working for a body corporate, they give you instruction to do it this way, and then they are if the instruction they give when you are wrong, then we may conclude they have knowingly, recklessly, negligently caused you to practice inappropriately. And the body corporates can be also referred to the professional service review. It is not only practitioners, the practices, and people associated with the practices can be referred. So there are three groups of people. The majority of the practitioners referred to are is what is on the screen before you, conduct by a practitioner. But if you have breached the 80 attendance or more in any 20 days in a 12-month period, you are automatically referred to professional service review. Then a body corporate can be referred to professional service review. If you want to know, 80% of the people are referred individually. About 5, 10 to 20% are referred for breaching the 80-20 rule, and occasionally practices have been referred to professional service review as well.
On that point, sorry to interrupt, I believe there was some controversy regarding a recent case in which a corporate medical entity were billing attendance items on behalf of their practitioners. So then does that mean that the corporate entities would be responsible or held liable?
They will be, because as long as it is billed under the provider's name, we would go and see them because it is billed under their name. But if there is sufficient evidence for us to suggest that this is a corporate and we have all the practitioners have this particular profile, then we may consider that, because there are some legislative requirements and rules of the games, I will call it that way. So if they are satisfied, they will be referred. But if one practitioner says that and other practitioners don't corroborate it, then it becomes you can't simply send. It is like when somebody gives a fraud tip-off. You need to have sufficient evidence to put somebody. Benefit of the doubt is always on the other side, not we think everybody is a crook sort of thing. So we try to be fair by the practitioner. And one of the important thing in this about I want to highlight the difference between services and attendances. If you see a patient and render item 721 and 723, the practitioner has rendered 2 services. There was a question about rendering 721, 723 and 2715 to the same patient. Then there will be 3 attendances on the one patient. So they will be counted as 3 attendances. Because in the category 1, if you look at the MBS online and look at category 1, the category 1 services are called attendances, where the practitioner should attend on the patient, see the patient minimum. As opposed to an ECG, which is a service, the GP can ask the nurse to do the service. She will do the ECG. The GP may not have to see the patient, can write a report and claim the benefit. So that is a service. If you suture a wound, we know vast majority of the practices with nurses. The nurses would clean the wound and everything. The GP will go and quickly suture, then come back and the nurse would dress the wound. So that is a service. The category 1 are attendances. So you may say, I only see 60 patients. If you have done 3 services per patient, you might have done 180 services. Attendances. And all attendances need to be personally attended. There is no telephone consultation that is payable. I am laboring the point because this is one of the areas where we find practitioners have misunderstood the legislation.
So I've got a very specific question relating to that. Wendy asks, if her nurse has done a cervical screening, can a GP claim for her time? So would that count as an attendance or a service?
Nurse cervical cancer screening is paid to the nurse. So doctor can't claim it.
Mhm.
The doctor's attendance time is paid if the doctor has attended on the patient.
Mhm.
And again, item 10997, which is a nurse item, which is when there is a chronic disease management item, and the nurse is delegated to do a certain job with the patient, like monitoring or something. And also there should be something which it's not a routine nurse job type thing. It should be something specific to that patient and it is written in the CDM services, CDM plan, that is GPMBTC. The nurses would see you at these intervals to do these checks on things, or your understanding of diabetes management, and come and check your weight and that type of thing. Then that service. But that service, the patient needs to see the doctor. The nurse can be seen, and the items are billed under the doctor's name. And also, we don't take that as a service under the doctor's name for the 80-20 provision. Because it is not a service, because it is rendered on behalf, and it is not in category 1. Then next, we are going into fraud very quickly. The department investigates suspected fraudulent activities. Fraud is defined as dishonestly obtaining a benefit or causing a loss by deception or other means. And the fraudulent activity may be referred to the Director of Commonwealth Prosecution. Provider or the business are legally responsible to repay incorrect claims when we do debt recovery. And the invoice sent to the amount to be repaid must be paid within 28 days of the invoice. Payment of the invoice must be within 28 days of the invoice date. Offset or deduction for future MBS benefit paid to the provider is now legislated. Up to now, it was not possible to take the money from the future payment to the practitioner, but recently the government has passed legislation to do it. And also there is a garnishing order which allows the department to recover the money from the debtor's bank account. The consequences of incorrect billing. Incorrectly claimed item must be repaid. Correcting incorrect claim can be time consuming and costly, one of the important things. And also it causes a reputational damage, practice and the provider reputation and staff recruitment and retention, because people say, this practice I worked there and there was a lot of anomalies, and it sort of reflects on the practice how it is run. And also the prosecution for fraud identified, and they also, if there is incorrect claims aren't paid, that we may prosecute them. And the most important thing is patient will have a item which was rendered to them which has not been rendered. So the accuracy of patient record is in doubt. That is, and also patient, because nowadays patients are more smarter than probably me, because they usually complain, I went and saw a doctor, I was there for 5 minutes. Then when I came and my Gov website and went and had a look, he has billed 721, 723. What does it mean? Then automatically we would go and look at the practitioner's profile. So if you think you have billed incorrectly, and we all make mistakes in life all the time. Sometimes without knowledge, because the front office has done something without your knowledge. Sometimes you have done something but thinking it to be right at that time. But later on you realize, oh, what I have done is wrong, because talking to somebody else I realize it is wrong. Then if you send in voluntary acknowledgement, that would be good. Then we will rectify the patient's notes as well to the effect that this service has not been done. And also, if you repay, usually there is no penalty for. But if we do an audit and find out what you have done is not right, there is a penalty associated with it. And also, looking at the practitioner review program, when we come and see you, one of the health professionals usually come and see you under the practitioner review program. And the health professional, usually a medical advisor. If it's a dental practitioner, it is a medical advisor or dental practitioner. If the optometrist or a medical practitioner again. Medical practitioner is the fall guy all the time we go. And we also see allied health providers. I have seen podiatrists to psychiatrists to anesthetists to cardiologists to all groups of people, physiotherapists to psychologists under the practitioner review program. And if you want to do voluntary acknowledgement, it is again, if you go into the Department of Health website and you put voluntary acknowledgement and search, you will get a website. And here is a website where you can go and look at where to get the forms or voluntary acknowledgement of sending in a voluntary acknowledgement. And this is the form you will find. It tells you, and also it tells you which address to send. Please make sure that you send the correct address. Don't send it to the Department of Human Services. And also, if a medical practitioner has come and seen you as part of the practitioner review program, and he might have talked to you and say, okay, this is incorrectly claimed, and you agree and you want to send it, don't send it to the practitioner. Please send it to the address in that form. And sometimes you may not be able to identify individual patients. Then in those instances, right from this day to this date, I will say item 30186 inappropriately. Could you please send me a list of patients I have seen? And usually the Department of Health obliges you with a list of patients if you say that time period. And it is also important to maintain good administrative record, because now it is legislated. You should keep your records for 2 years, even though you don't need to keep the patient vouchers for 2 years. You need to keep a record for 2 years. That doesn't mean you can destroy the record in 2 years' time, because APRA and the state legislation and government legislation, you need to keep it for minimum 7 years, and if it is minors, till they become majors, and then another 7 years. So this is basically for Medicare purposes. If you ask to provide record for audit purposes, you are required to keep the record. It is again legislated recently. One of the important things, medical defense will tell you the same. Ensure accurate record, secure patient information, reduce the risk of incorrect claims and fraud, provide transparent reporting. And if you say, I have done item 723, the practice has done bill for 721, 723, and 2715, you say, look at my notes, this is what I have done. This is for you easy to substantiate. And also for us, if we want to involve the practice in it, we can say, okay, this is what he has done. This has been systematically done by looking at the notes. Then we may be able to do further activity with the practice. So good record keeping keeps you out of trouble all the time, for you, for me, for everybody. And administrative record keeping guidelines are found in that website. Now, health legislation amended, improved Medicare compliance and other measures, Bill 2018 passed. There are more options for debt recovery. We said we can get future payment, take 20% of the future payment. There is a record keeping requirement for 2 years. Notice to produce documents is aligned with Health Insurance Act and National Health Act and Dental Benefit Act. And administrative penalties are across all 3 acts. Earlier it was only against the MBS. And also from 1st of July 2019, those who are working for corporate practices where you get 65% or 55% of the benefit, because at the moment under the law, provider is responsible for all the recovery. We can get the practice as well involved in the recovery for the share if both of you agree on particular arrangement, the regulations need to be made. That is coming into effect on 1st of July 2019. So till then, you are personally responsible for any debt incurred under your provider number. For education and support, these are all the different websites available to you. So there are health professional guidelines, compliance education at health.gov.au. There are Medicare compliance modules in the doctor portal. Claim queries and assistance with the interpretation of item numbers 132150. This is for practitioners. For patients, there is a 132152 number, whether somebody has billed them 1721, 1723 before they come to you for. And also the Ask MBS, because if you ring up 132150, it's a verbal answer, you don't have a record. If you send a query to Ask MBS at humanservices.gov.au, not health department, this is human services number, they will give you a written report which you can produce as evidence why you were misled, if you claim to be misled. So you will not be misled, but because a lot of time I go and they say something, oh, this is what they told me, because here you will have a written record, we would be happy to take it on board. You will not be misled, and you can bill appropriately. And the last slide tells you, we all play a role in the integrity of health payments, which is important for the sustainability of Medicare, your tax, my tax, everybody's tax. You are the owner of the provider number that is yours, and also use the provider number for the particular location of your practice, because sometimes we analyze practice, because if a practitioner is practicing urban and rural, we look at divide the practice thing to see whether billing is different and it can be understandable. MBS claims are clinically based. The services should be clinically relevant. I can't emphasize it. It is the most important part is clinically relevant, not that I can claim I have fulfilled the item descriptor. Important to have robust record keeping. Mistake can be fixed, and by claiming by sending in a voluntary acknowledgement. Incorrectly claimed or paid benefit must be repaid to the Department of Health. And education resources, this is one of that is available to you to support you. And if you are interested, I can go into the steps involved in the practitioner service program, practitioner review program, which is the precursor to referral to the Director of Professional Service Review in bit more detail, but it is up to you all. That's the end of the presentation. Now it is open to questions.
All right, thanks so much, Naren. So we have about 5 minutes briefly for some questions. I apologize in advance if we can't get to all of them tonight, but thank you for keeping the questions coming. And rest assured, we will try to answer all of these online on ShareGP in due course. One of the questions, Naren, was what determines a service for the purposes of the 80-20 rule?
That is what 80-20 rule. If you go to the general section of the Medicare benefit, it is AN, G, they are called GN numbers. It tells you anything 7 to 1, all the personal attendance consultation items, all the mental health plan items, domiciliary management medication reviews, health assessments, all the PIP items, all of them constitute attendance services.
I see.
So there is a fair number of them. If I want to tell you sort of in a sort of, this is vague answer, but vague numbers, anything under 5068 is usually an attendance item number, but anything under 5068 also include specialist consultation and everything. But there are certain item numbers medical practitioners can bill. any item it under less than 5068 usually would be a attendance item. So count that number of attendance items, not count the number of patients.
I see. All right. And can you give us an example of other circumstances where a Medicare audit or review could be triggered?
It is basically when one, as I said, we also generally look at what is happening to item numbers, any item number. If there is a sudden build-up on an item number, like item 721 has been billed 800,000 times a year, suddenly it becomes 160,000 items per year by the whole profession. We would say we will audit the top 100 providers. There are two reasons for that. One, we think top 100 there is a highly likelihood of inappropriate claiming. The second, by doing the audit and talking to the practitioners, we may see what is driving the practice, whether there's a misunderstanding of the item numbers or there is something out there which we haven't understood. So it is not all the time it is to say you are wrong. That is one important thing. Whenever people are audited, don't assume you have billed something wrong, or when we visit you as part of the professional service review scheme and from practitioner review program, the initial stages to the PA. It is basically to understand the practice and whether we can, from the practitioner's description of the practice and our statistics, whether we can be comfortable, our concern of possible inappropriate practices allayed.
I see. All right. And you made allusion to the point where in the event of a practitioner review, it would go before a panel of peers. And could you comment on what constitutes this body of peers?
Okay, I will go quickly through. There are about 6 or 7 steps in the process. First, if the profile is atypical, usually a medical advisor will phone you up and discuss it with you over a period of half an hour or 1 hour, trying to get your background. Then if the information you give is address the concern, we close the case. If it is not, your profile is reviewed, we usually tell the practitioner it will be reviewed because we have some concern about it, because we can't keep both the statistics. That doesn't mean you should change the practice if you are doing appropriately, but the only thing is if you think you are practice, there is a concern and what we have told you makes sense to you, after talking to your colleague, you can change your practice. If there is no change, the chances are we will send to a delegate of the chief executive of Medicare, who would look at the practice and ask profile and ask you for a submission. After the submission, if he is satisfied, he will close the case. If he is not closed, he will send it to the director of professional service review. He will look at the referral and he can close the case prima facie looking at it, because he has had similar cases in the past and he says this is not going to. Or he may ask to come and get a sample of notes and look at it and send you a report saying why he is concerned. If he is satisfied, he will close the case. If he is concerned and you agree, yes, I think I have practiced inappropriately from the report, then you agree to a repayment or a reprimand, or there are several steps he can. It can be reprimanded, he may ask you to repay. Or if you don't agree with his assessment, he will send you a committee of peers. Usually in general practice, it will be general practitioners, but all of them will be doctors, basic. And there are only 2 people who can say I have practiced inappropriately. The practitioner agrees to the DPSR and say I have practiced inappropriately, or committee of peers. So only 2 groups of people. We think there may be possible or reason to suspect inappropriate practice. It is only suspicion.
Yeah. And for anyone who is contacted or going through this process, is there any support available to GPs, or is it really left up to them to contact their MDO?
They can contact the MDO. Some of them get their lawyers. Probably about 5% of them get their lawyers or MDO. 95% of them feel comfortable, but they are done, they come. But even if you feel comfortable, getting a support person is always useful. And also some of them get the practice managers, because some of the practice, it is like if you are a GP, you don't know how the process works, isn't it? You only see the patient. So some of them get practice managers or the receptionist to come and sit in. We are always happy to have somebody sit in. We don't object to it at all. We don't want a panel of 20 people sitting there, but 1 or 2 support people, more than welcome if they want to. But most of the practitioners feel comfortable, but contacting the different medical defense organization in anything, we pay the premium, might as well contact them to see what they want to say.
I like that answer. All right. Thank you, Philip and Naren, for your time tonight. So just in closing, I'd like to thank also the admin and support, particularly Liz and Kate, for their work in the background, and to you, our audience, for listening attentively at this time of the day. We appreciate your attention. So just quickly, there'll be some small group catch-up events coming. So these are under the auspices of the Vic Faculty New Fellows Committee. And please keep an eye out for these events close to you. I believe there's one coming up in Albury-Wodonga, and also one in metropolitan Melbourne, but these will be advertised. Also, Why Be a Member Day, where you'll have an opportunity to engage with the college and ask questions about where you fit in and how the college functions, and how you can be involved and support the activities. Also, if there are any further questions or suggestions for further webinars, we encourage you to head on over to ShareGP, where this presentation will be uploaded, and also post on there, and you should all have access through your RACGP portal. Also, please, if you could help us out by completing the online evaluation, you will attain free CPD points for your attendance at this event. So with that being said, I'd just like to close off with one final poll. How did you hear about this webinar? All right, so 59% heard about it through the RACGP Victoria e-newsletter, and 17% through word of mouth. So again, thank you for your attendance tonight, and we hope to put on more of these webinars addressing this topic soon. So keep your eyes posted on this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
It was good that all attended.